Hi, I'm Tony Russo, and this is In Case You Missed It from Kates-Boylston for the week ending Friday, May 16th, 2025. Got a bunch of stuff coming up for you today. More news from Matthews and SCI this week, as well as some crematory news, some NIMBY news, as I always like to do it. And there's some other announcements and observations I want to share with you. But before we get to that, let's listen to this message from our sponsor, Matthews International.
For more than 20 years, Matthews Aurora Funeral Solutions has been providing innovative technology to support funeral professionals and their families. Their Arranger presentation system makes showcasing service and merchandise options simple. Family Connections technology enables families to participate in arrangement planning from the comfort of home. And the Advisor system combines case management and interactive planning, all in one place. Simplify the arrangement process with technology designed for you. Visit MatthewsAurora.com for a free demo or call 1-800-457-111 today. That's MatthewsAurora.com or 1-800-457-1111. Call today.
Of course, first up is a story about Matthews International because it bought the Dodge Company this week for $57 million. Now, this comes on the tail of the divestment of SGK, which wasn't like a divestment. They still are making money from it. They're just not responsible to run it. You know, they're an investor in it now rather than an owner-operator kind of arrangement. And with this new cash influx, the first thing that they bought, as far as I can tell, is the Dodge Company, and it makes a lot of sense. Matthews is still having a lot of success with its memorialization sector. It is not a loss leader by any stretch of the imagination. You know, this wasn't a great month for them, as I mentioned in the last report, because of sales and flagging, memorialization purchases like copper and granite and things to make headstones and caskets and things like that. They weren't hit too hard by tariffs, but it's interesting that this purchase of the Dodge Company won't just boost its memorialization sector, it'll also enhance its offerings. So all the Dodge Company customers are in good shape. They have the same reps and everything is going to stay the same, at least right off the bat. And I have reached out to Matthews and I hope to talk to them more about, some of the plans. And I think this is an exciting thing for everyone involved. The Dodge Company in its release said that it had been open 132 years. And it's tough to sell to a company after you have this much legacy and, of course, this kind of reputation, but it's selling to another company with a long and kind of storied reputation in funeral service. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, but I think that this is going to be a win for everyone involved. And there's a link to the press release in the show notes in case you haven't seen it. And as I said, I've reached out to Matthews and hopefully I'll have some more reporting on it in the coming weeks. Service Corporation International presented at the Oppenheimer 20th Annual Industrial Growth Conference on May 8th. They didn't say a lot of things that weren't kind of part. I don't know if they said anything that wasn't specifically part of the recent earnings report, but they did highlight a couple of things for the analysts that I wanted to highlight for you so that you were on board. One is that SCI claims a 17% market share of the funeral and cemetery industry, and they expect to continue to grow earnings, and they expect to do that by stock buybacks, even as revenue flags a bit, but that's almost secondary to what I really want to talk about, which was the way that they addressed the way that they handle cemeteries. So we ran a story back in March about Jody Dupree, who is the market director for SCI, and takes care of a bunch of their cemeteries. And he talked about their approach to cemetery sales and to making sure that people were getting all of the potential options. And he talked about starting high and staying high as far as offering prices for different services and positions. So with that in mind, hearing how SCI intends to go forward with its cemetery spaces, it is something that, especially if you're a cemeterian, is worth knowing about. Under questioning from the analysts, the folks at SCI said that they do have a bunch of cemeteries that are running out of room. Not a critical amount, but cemeteries sometimes run out of room. How do they deal with it? Well, one of the ways that they deal with it is by reconfiguring cemeteries. So they will repave, they will rearrange, they will reorganize to see if they can find some more available space to sell. And of course, as space becomes a premium, it starts going at a premium, which is another thing that they keep their eye on very steadily because there is a limited amount of space. They want to make sure that they're kind of maximizing the profitability of all of the cemeteries. So the other really interesting thing that they said was, when you can't go out anymore, you can always go up. So building taller mausoleums and finding ways to make it so that they're able to keep all of their cemeteries as going concerns without having to worry too much about where they're going to keep their cash flow running in their to keep the perpetual care fund ready for the day when they sell the last plot. So there's a link to my reporting on it in the show notes. Honestly, the transcript that I read was on one of those internet sites where they kind of run the transcript and then, there's all sorts of pop-ups and stuff like that. So I'm just going to repurpose the transcript and I will put it in FSI, but it'll just be a link so that you'll be able to see all of the details if you're interested. Texas is looking to change the way that it does its cremations, or may change the way that it does its cremations, among other things, in a big kind of redo of its death investigation laws. There are people who are pushing for more medical examiners, and the medical examiner would have to sign off on the death certificate before a cremation could take place. Now, in Texas right now, most of the people who sign off on death certificates are elected, and Texas has, according to the article, which is linked in the story, kind of a history of, not paying as much attention to suspicious deaths as maybe the suspiciously deceased would like. But that's a separate issue. The Texas Funeral Directors Association objected just on the grounds that it was going to slow things down and get more expensive. And I will do a feature on them when I, get a call back. But I had posted it on my LinkedIn page, so I figured I should at least touch on it in this column. I don't know that rushing cremations has ever done anyone well, and that is my confusion, and it is my uninformed opinion. So the headline reads, "Launch of free digital obituary and online memorial service that helps families honor loved ones." It is a press release, and because it is a press release, you know that the headline is either completely false or mostly false. I'm going to call this one completely false, although it's very close to mostly false. It is free for 30 days, then it is €200 plus or minus. We reported a little while back that there has been some sort of shift in the way they do obits in the UK and throughout Europe, I guess, where it's not as free as it used to be. So people are kind of up in arms at the cost of obituaries. I'm really curious about whether a direct-to-consumer obituary page is something people will respond to. And I'm really skeptical that, funeral directors will, pay this fee to kind of facilitate this permanent memorial when they already have, their own obituary pages. Obituaries are really going to be undergoing a significant change, I think. I mean, that's not a particularly insightful thing to say. I've mentioned before that I'm a huge fan of the things that a company named Chapter is doing, which is doing videos and using AI to make videos about the deceased. There have been a couple of other companies that have started up that do things similarly. Obituaries are an interesting place because they do generate revenue, right? They generate affiliate revenue and they generate, some minor charges for to the family for doing the work of getting the obituary up and out. So it'll be interesting to see how this evolves over the next decade or so. I don't believe that people are going to continue to pay what amounts to $250 or so, $300 to have their own web page for a permanent memorial, a permanent digital memorialization. I think we're in a gray area that's going to get a little bit more clear as we go forward. I don't know how many of you, I think many, if not most of you, have seen the things that Implant Recycling has suggested, the virtual memorials and watching the virtual memorials live. It's going to be an interesting couple of years as people figure out where, besides Facebook, to put these obituaries in a world where there's just increasingly more competition for, eyes and attention. And this is such specific attention when it comes to obituaries. So anyway, there's a link to this press release in the show notes, and you can look into it more yourself if you're that interested. But I'm interested if you'd like to send a little feedback. I'd love to know where you think obituaries are going over the next decade or so, because no offense intended to this company, but this is not it. That $300 to have a web page is very 1995 in my humble, as always, opinion. All right, link in the show notes. Something else that SCI mentioned in its Oppenheimer report and in its earnings report, and something that Carriage mentioned in its earnings report: if you have a funeral home that does not put your prices online, you're not just fighting a losing battle with the government. You're fighting what amounts to a losing PR battle, I guess is the best way to put it. Oh, so there's a story out of Ohio. It's a consumer watchdog following up on a complaint that a woman had that what she was quoted for a direct cremation had additional charges when she got it back. And of course, what did they do? They checked to see which funeral homes had prices online and which didn't. Again, it is not the law, but now there is a story about how funeral homes are trying to get over on consumers. And of the 40 that they checked, only 7 had prices online. This is an expectation that people have. I understand that many funeral homes want the freedom to not have to post their prices online. And I guess that you are welcome to it. The thing is that now it's gone from being common to looking very, very suspicious. There shouldn't be a story that says, the headline of the story could be 7 out of 40 funeral homes have gone above and beyond with pricing requirements, right? But that's not what the headline is. The headline is, the funeral service is shady, and look, only 7 out of 40 have their prices put up. It's just a bad look. And it's something that you should at least be aware of, because this is where the stories are going to come from. These aren't national stories about how the FTC has their foot on the neck of small business. This is your local television station, in this case, doing a report that the funerals in that area aren't trustworthy. Full stop. So if you are among the funeral homes that do post their prices online, it is something that you want to kind of shout to the rooftops, especially if you're in Ohio here, because if you get 21 News and you're one of the 33 that don't have their prices posted online, you should at least, put a link to the GPL on the front page. It doesn't, I know that this is a more complex than the television station is making it. It's more complex than I'm making it. But the fact is that this is how the reporting is going. It would be irresponsible of me not to tell you that they are reporting that you are a scammer if you're not putting your prices online. There's no protection from that. There's no protection from ignorant consumers. There's no protection from bad reporting. Trust me, sometimes I've done bad reporting. All I can do is say, well, I was mistaken, and here are the things as they should be, and people don't care. Stories like this always bother me because I know that it's not as simple as that. But guess what? I don't think it matters anymore. I think these are stories we're going to see more and more of. Throw the GPL up online with a little PDF on it. Carriage and SCI aren't even following really these FTC arguments anymore. They're just putting all their prices online and finding other ways to make sure that they're educating people when they come in. I think that's really the solution. And at this point, it may be the only solution. But anyway, there's a link to this news story in the show notes. And that will do it for this time. In case you missed it, is a Kates-Boylston production. It was written and edited by me, Tony Rousseau. Thank you so much for listening or watching, whether you're listening or watching. And thank you for subscribing, unless you haven't subscribed, in which case I don't take my thank you back. I replace it with a please. So please consider subscribing. If you have your phone handy, just pick it up and open the podcatcher of your choice. If you have an Android phone, that will probably be Spotify. It also might be Amazon Music. It also might be a regular podcast listener, but if that's the case, you probably would have subscribed by now, or at least I hope that's the case. So type in Funeral Service Insider and pow, we will come up. We're the only ones who have that name. And then you can subscribe, and when a show comes out, it'll get zapped right to your phone. If you're more of a YouTuber, ring that little bell, and when we put a new episode out, you will be notified on your email, I guess, on your YouTube page. I've never been on YouTube long enough to also get a notification the way that I get email notifications. I'm not as heavy a YouTube user as other people seem to be. But anyway, that will do it for this week, and I will catch you next time.